everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I'm just going to let people filter in. I see the numbers ticking right up. So we will hold for just a few seconds while you guys get in. Still see a lot of people filtering in, so I'm going to give you guys just a few more seconds here. Hope everybody's having a great week. It's very hot here in the DC area.
Almost over.
Yes, almost over, and I'm hopeful that next week won't be 90 degrees every day.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to get away from that in DC in July.
You just can't. Yeah. Not going really anywhere. Are you going on a vacation this summer, Amy? Anywhere wonderful?
Nothing really planned. I think I'm just going to get a pool instead and stay home.
Sounds like a really good idea. All right, guys, it looks like we've hit a good sort of slowdown of people coming in. So we'll go ahead and get started, as I know we have a lot to say this hour. So welcome so much to the second part of our three-part webinar series. This one is Growing Beyond Your Network, Marketing Your Skills and Brand as an Independent Consultant. Can we move to the next slide? For those of you who aren't familiar, we are MBO partners. My name is McLean Robbins, and I'm here today with our Chief Talent Officer, Amy O'Donnell. And we are working to make it easier for enterprise organizations and top independent professionals to do business together. We have been doing so for more than 20 years, building a unique dual-sided ecosystem and platform that's composed of many of the world's leading businesses and most in-demand professionals. We are working quite hard to drive change on the ground. We're constantly advocating on behalf of independents on Capitol Hill, the longest running research on the independent workforce in our state of independence. And we have tens of thousands of independents that work across our platform every month. And so we're really excited to share some of our knowledge and learnings with you today in this pretty immersive Q&A. Please don't forget that you have chat functionality, and so feel free to dump questions in the Q&A. We'll take them at the end, but we'll also take them if they're really relevant throughout the program, and of course a recording will be made available. If you want to move to the next slide, I want to make you guys aware we did have a part one of this series that was focused a lot on how to get your online presence in shape, a lot of really actionable tips about your resume, about LinkedIn, etc. And so you can view that on our webpage, mbopartners.com/insights. You can look at our old webinars. And we also will be having part 3 of this series with some hands-on recruiting tips on August 20th. And of course, all of these will be recorded. If you registered today, you'll get a copy of the recording. We also have one additional webinar this month that is really fits in nicely. It's not part of the series exactly, but will fit in really nicely, called Winning Your Audience, Expert Tips to Improve Public Speaking. Actually, the guy who's doing that webinar was the head speechwriter and chief of staff in the Reagan administration. So he has lots of really powerful experience there. So that'll be really a good webinar to attend. mbopartners.com/events to register for any of those. As I said, McLean Robbins, I'm your Vice President of Enterprise Marketing here at MBO. I'm tasked with working between our independent talent and our enterprise organizations. And I am joined today by our featured guest, Amy O'Donnell, our Chief Talent Officer, who has been with the company for at least over a decade at this point.
Yes.
So I'm really, really excited to have you, Amy. Do you want to just dive right in? I think we've got a lot to cover. So yeah. As I said, last time we really talked a lot, tons of actionable tips about how to get your resume in shape. But now my online presence is looking good, and I'm not totally sure how to go to market with my services beyond those people that I already call every time I need something. So why don't we just dive right in with how do I talk to contacts that aren't in my inner circle?
So in our world, what I'm kind of used to hearing from our consultants is that they started a lot of times with an inner network that they have, ex-employers, colleagues, people they've worked with. And then when that kind of dries up, or they're looking for a new project and their network just doesn't seem to have anything, what's next? So the first part of this was make sure you look good online. Resume is one thing, LinkedIn's another, and LinkedIn's pretty important, I think. And then also it's always a great idea for consultants to have some sort of web page. It doesn't have to be some sort of website. It doesn't have to be extensive, but it shows that you're an independent business, and you have a way to talk about your services there and highlight some things that you've done. So let's assume that we all have that done and together, and now it's kind of, now what? So I think of it in two ways, McLean. The first one that I'm going to talk about, which I think is probably the more difficult one, that people would love to just fall into projects with all their friends and buddies, but that doesn't always happen.
Can't always be easy, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. It is for some people, but not everybody. So how do I, go to market? And I just think it's getting a plan. First, thinking about what type of work do I want to do? I think when you were doing proactive outreach about your services, you have the ability to market the work you love as opposed to, just working on the things that are coming in the pipeline to you. So take that opportunity to kind of think about what projects have you loved doing? What do they look like? And, you can kind of package that up. One of the things that I would look at too is, what companies do you like to work with? What industries do you have experience in? And then more specifically, who are the buyers? And if you kind of think about over your career of projects, have you been hired initially by recruiters, hiring managers, CEOs, ex-colleagues? Like, where have you had your success in the past from a level or position in a company? And then can you look inside your network and make a list of who you know versus, who might be out there in other companies that you'd like to get into in those same kind of roles?
I think that's really interesting. I don't know that I'd ever thought to search sort of by roles before. So once I've kind of done that past analysis of my own work, and I know what companies I've worked with before, what types of maybe managers I've gravitated towards before, what do I do then? Once I've identified them, how do I kind of take that next
So try to identify what I'm kind of calling your ideal buyer. So
okay.
From an ideal buyer perspective, who are those people that you've known in the past? But then look in your network, see how many of those you have. Like, say it's a director of IT or a VP of marketing or whoever it is that is, used your services. How many of those roles are in your audience, in your networks? And then, certainly let those people know what you're doing, but can you expand by role across other companies that, maybe there are other directors of IT in certain organizations that I want to kind of target and reach out to based on the industry or the company. So once you have your list, and I always suggest kind of making a list. I think it's a good idea. And I will say, in this world, and most people probably know this, but I mean, some of it's a numbers game. I'm not saying there have to be thousands, but it can't be two. If it's going to be two, you might be disappointed. So try to get a pretty decent list of people that you think could use your services in a value-based way. And then think about doing some outreach.
Okay. And I think that list is, first of all, that list is just such a good idea, because I think for me, at least, I've written it down, and it's like, oh, this is real. I have to do this. So even if it's just the notepad on your computer, you have that to go back to. But when you say outreach and sort of tell people what you're doing, could you be specific about that? Are you saying, post a LinkedIn status update, or you update your website, sort of what does outreach look like?
Yeah, I think there's two ways. I actually think some of it is sales and marketing outreach. So, actually targeting people with an in-mail, with saying, hey, here are the services that I'm offering, and linking them to either a one-pager. I am a fan of a one-pager, not everybody is, but I think you need to be really concise in the type of work you could do for them. The market's not going to figure out what it is you do. You've got to figure that out and talk about it in a value-based way. So you either, give them some outreach and say, hey, here's the type of projects I've done in the past, if your organization is looking for this, or I would say follow in the news too. I mean, what's going on with companies? When you're looking at that outreach, try to connect what it is you do to what might be going on with those managers or directors, because even in times like today, lots of companies have lost employees, and we all know the work didn't go away. So
yeah, and they're likely using contractors to do it.
Well, or they're struggling and they haven't really thought about even using anybody because they're afraid to ask their CFOs for headcount, right? Because you're not going to get it in this world. But maybe you could offer up bites of a certain chunk of service that you have that is small. You know, companies may be more apt to use contractors during a time like this than others. So I think spending some time packaging that outreach, when I say packaging it, it can be a cover letter of sorts that is, hey, here's what I've done for other companies or other people in positions like yours. You know, I'm offering my services as a small firm. Let me know, if if you could use any of this.
I think that's great. And I have been seeing a lot of content recently, LinkedIn, these are companies that are hiring, but also these are roles. And I love that I'm seeing roles that I didn't, contact tracing was not something we knew existed 8 months ago. I'm sure it did. We just didn't talk about it. So lots of new types of things that you could be pretty inventive about describing your ability to do or set up for a company. You talk about, making that list of people and saying maybe 10 buyers, 10 companies you want to target. What if you identify that there's a role within a company, but you're not connected to that person? How do you approach your contacts in a way that says, can you introduce me or ask for a referral that doesn't feel pushy?
So do you mean, there's a role somewhere and you might have a contact that may be connected? Maybe they work at the same organization or they may know of somebody, and how do you kind of reach out to that person to say, can I get a referral or introduction?
I think there's two parts to it. There's that. I get a lot of that on LinkedIn. Can you introduce me to so-and-so that I'm third degree connected to? But
sure.
What if I know that I want to go into, I'm going to pick KPMG, one of our clients. I know I want to go into KPMG. I know I want to do a project. I have a couple of connections there, but I'm just not quite sure where to go. Is it okay to go to my contact there and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Can you help me? And how do I phrase that in a way that's not just cold?
I think that's completely fine. But what I would say is make it easy for them, especially in these large organizations. They don't all know what's going on or what's being advertised. And so if you want introduced, then I think you should be specific about the role. Do some of your own homework on LinkedIn. I know they don't always advertise hiring managers, but maybe you can figure out what group that might be in based on, some of the content in the rec. And if you're going to ask somebody to help you, try to help them do that and how they might, refer you in, and then always give them the out if, maybe they don't know anybody or don't feel comfortable, but I always think it doesn't hurt to ask.
I think that's particularly useful, as it doesn't hurt to ask. I'm a little shy about asking contacts for favors.
I think it's harder,
I shy away from it.
I think it's harder for people to ask their known network than it is unknown. So I think, having a marketing idea for both, and it might be a little different. People you don't know, yes, I think you've got to be very clear in the value you want to bring and the type of work you're going to do. With your known network, some of the things you can do there as well is just activity. Be active on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on whatever it is that is germane to your industry, occupation. I use LinkedIn because that is kind of the biggest professional.
It's the professional standard. I think that works.
It makes
but there's
easy.
Spots too, if you're in other areas. I think we were talking about GitHub. We've talked about even YouTube, if you have some video content to share, your website.
So a way to connect your current network without asking them for referrals or them understanding like, oh, gee, does this person want a project, is to be active in that world where they're seeing these feeds of things that you've done. You want to try to establish yourself, if you can, as a thought leader in whatever it is, your craft is. So how do you do that? Well, you can write an article, a blog post. You can share some content from the latest project that you just completed. And maybe it was on a new version of a software tool that, not everybody has. So I think if you are active in your network all the time is seeing these updates. And I think that helps to let them know what the kind of work you might be available to do without really being pushy as to, give me a project.
I think that's great. And I've learned even recently, I used to sort of just comment or like articles, and now I'm sharing them to my network and adding, maybe a paragraph of my own thoughts to it. And the activity on my page has just exploded in recent weeks because people have that time, they have that extra time to go in and if they see thoughtful commentary, they're engaging with it. I found tagging other individuals that might be interested so that it pops into their feed works. But sometimes people that I haven't engaged with in 2-3 years are coming into the feed or from different walks of life are engaging. I love that activity breeds activity.
Yeah.
What types of posts have you seen be most successful in terms of activity? Is it telling people about services? Is it more that thought leadership blog post style?
I think it's thought leadership. That can be defined in lots of different ways. But if you are a panelist on something, if you're and I know we have some content in our marketing stuff about, doing a podcast or, there's resources out there to help you understand how to write a blog post and to be thoughtful about those certain areas. I mean, remember, we're talking about consulting, right? So consultants are people that are going to teach a business something or do something for them. So you have to kind of establish yourself as someone that a business would want to go to for advice. And I think
that's great.
That stuff is the way to do it. But the other thing in this world, McLean, you mentioned you're seeing lots of activity on LinkedIn, which I am too. I think, again, the COVID world has increased that in a good way because people are looking for that interaction and probably looking at LinkedIn more than they used to, maybe just because they have the time. But I'm seeing a lot of social stuff out there too, like sharing, pro bono work. So maybe now is a good time to offer your services somewhere for free. Certain businesses that, maybe couldn't afford it, but you're going to do a website for them or help them with their marketing or like things like that you can share as well. And I'm seeing a lot of people doing that. I don't know if you've seen that, but I've seen lots.
Yeah. I think that's great because I think that the question that I've seen it come up a couple of times throughout these types of scenarios is I'm out of work and I don't have something new, but that pro bono gives you work experience to share and then you don't have to say, I'm using that. I've seen the new, I'm looking for jobs on LinkedIn, which is great, but now I'm still doing something.
But maybe your activity feed is about volunteering.
Yep. You're being active in the community.
Yes, exactly. You're still active.
Yeah, a couple of things have come in the chat, and I think some are tips, which I like. Peter says that he posts on his company's blog and then links to it on LinkedIn with the too long didn't read summary, and I love that. The sort of 5 things to know about what I said in 2,000 words.
Oh, I love that.
Eddie says that he is thinking about getting a veteran-owned certification. And that getting sort of into a niche might help win more work. And he asked about your opinion, but I would think any certification, this is the time to do it. Learn a new skill or advertise that you have really good experience in an area.
Yeah, no, I definitely, and especially any type of certification like the veteran status, companies have to funnel a certain amount of work to those organizations. So that can really help you have a leg up. Make sure that you let everybody know that's, you're open for that type of work now too, because you might fall into some other bucket with them that they hadn't even used you for before.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. We're getting a lot of actually feedback here in the chat about the pro bono work. Somebody says they had success. They actually got a client as a result. And Anne makes a really nice point that if you know your worth, you could limit it to 2 to 4 hours followed by your rate, which I do love. I found that sometimes when you say it's free, you want to set those
you got
boundaries.
To put a box around it, right? Yeah, it can't take you hours and hours.
Yeah. So now we're talking, I do have one other question here. Do you think LinkedIn Premium is worth the expense? I tend to say it is, even when you're not job searching, but I'm curious your thoughts.
I don't think it costs very much. And the other thing that I think you get with it, I personally like seeing who looked at you.
I like to know that.
Sometimes by seeing that, you're like, wow, maybe this is a buyer who's kind of, just kind of looking around out there. They're browsing, but you might be able to turn that into something. And then the other thing too is if you are going to be marketing your services, you're going to get in mails with that. And you want to be
Good to
able
get
to reach
people.
out to people who you're not connected to.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about, it's outside your wheelhouse. You don't necessarily have a contact in the network, but you're applying for an actual role here. How can you be selective about what you apply for
Yeah.
in today's climate where you sort of are saying, do I throw everything at the wall or do I get really laser focused?
Yeah, I think when you are doing your outreach, I'd say you should be pretty laser focused. And sometimes that's hard for consultants because they have so many skills and they want to make sure that people know what all of them are. But when you're marketing yourself, you need to tell that client how to use you and be pretty specific. When you're applying to roles, I think you can apply to a myriad of roles. But one of the things that I really would suggest is that you don't just apply to everything you see. And if you do it with one company, honestly, they can see that. I mean, recruiters a lot of times can see across, and then sometimes your name comes up and they just go, "Oh, it's that." You might even
They can see I've applied to
it's
25
the same
things.
person, right?
Across,
Yeah.
could they see it across other companies or just one company?
No, just their own, but
Okay.
I just think that there's 100 recruiters there and all the different jobs that you're applying to, they all can't see, but a lot of times they do. They notice that somebody's just, and let me tell you why that does annoy them a bit. If you have 100 people that apply to something, those recruiters have to get through those applications. And when people just, not thoughtfully apply to stuff, like, sure, they know they're not really a match, but they think, well, maybe. If you're really far off from what they're looking for, that actually, I don't think helps anybody. Very seldom does that, like, say, oh, gee, I think I'm going to call this person for something else. So I would say be thoughtful into what you do apply for. I think you can go broad. I also would suggest having a master resume, which I don't see too many people doing. Especially consultants have so much experience in different, project worlds.
Yeah.
Then if you do have different experience for some of these other projects, tailor your resume. And a way to do that is have a master resume. You can quickly pick and pull what's going to be, is it lead with healthcare or, whatever that rec is asking for. You're going to have better luck.
Yeah, like the 6-page resume that you narrow down to 2. I think I learned that fairly recently. I think that's a great tip here. You're using a little bit of terminology that I think the attendees will know, but I want to make sure they get. So there's a hiring manager and there's a recruiter. And sometimes the hiring manager is doing the recruiting, but oftentimes companies have a specific recruiting function that the hiring managers say, hey, go find me this person. And they're a little bit more skilled. Which is doing the majority of the recruiting now? And did I miss any nuance between the two roles?
No, you didn't. And I think it's all, companies all do it differently. So in our marketplace, for instance, we have several clients that actually have recruiters or a program office that are running that. And there's reasons for that. The managers are busy and they basically will get some of the need from a manager and decide, are we going to direct source this role or should it go to a different vendor? So they're making that decision, and you are dealing with recruiters in that realm or the program office in procurement. But then we have other pockets where managers, they aren't on there broadly. When I see managers using marketplaces and systems the most on their own, or even LinkedIn, is when they hire a couple of the same kinds. They know that there's these 3 roles that they always need and they need a lot of. And so they want to build a community of that. So I think it's important to know who you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a hiring manager, you're obviously going to conduct yourself probably a little differently than if you are with a recruiter. But realize that hiring manager might not have the time to follow up on all the resumes as diligently as a recruiter would, because recruiters, that's their job. That's their life. That's what they're doing all day.
Yeah, I love a recruiter because they may come back to me for another job later, and a hiring manager likely won't. But I think when you get right to the hiring manager, you know what the job is.
Well, now you're with a decision maker. And so again, when you talk about the outreach, I think that's who I would be sending, because who's the ultimate buyer of most consulting projects is a manager. It's like they have a need, they have a project that needs to get done and they need to augment it. So that is your ideal person because they're the decision maker. But in a lot of these situations, you've got to get through a couple other people in order to get to that decision maker.
I want to touch a little bit on that getting through concept in just a second, but I do see one question from Rebecca here that I think is sort of useful and she asks, what is the universe of projects available during the pandemic? And basically the question is, what are people hiring for right now? Do you want to give a little, you've seen some of this hands-on in our system, so I'm curious what you're seeing.
Yeah, so I am seeing actually by industry and by pockets. It's like in some industries, there's a lot, this contact tracing is big in all the states and, there's a lot of state government projects being given out, all related to COVID compliance, contact tracing, things like that. So we're seeing that. I'm seeing technology still. I mean, again, with having to get all these infrastructures in place and everything to the cloud and all of the Zoom sort of things, I mean, we're still seeing that being pretty rich. I think there are not a lot of recs out there is what I would say, not just for contractors, but I think the strings have been pulled in a lot of big companies for no full-time hiring. And what they've tried to do is not furlough or lay off lots of people. And so they've kept them on their bench and they're trying to reuse people that in the past, I think they were busy and they would go and get contractors and bring them on. So we're seeing a little bit of that on the contract world kind of slow down because they're trying to reuse who they have. But I also think now is probably a great time to think about the hiring managers that are strapped and don't have any recs or headcount, but might be able to sell a project to, their boss or their CFO on work that still needs to get done.
Great. So what I'm hearing from you is a couple of really interesting things. I'm hearing just because there's no job out there doesn't mean I shouldn't reach out to my network. And then if I've worked with an enterprise before, now's the time to go back to that point of contact that I work with and say, hey, I'm available, particularly on the strategy side. I know you guys might need help. I'm sort of proactively telling you I'm here. What can I do, or put together a little bit of a pitch or ask for a call
and be empathetic.
Do that cold outreach.
Because really the people that are still in these companies are strapped because they've lost lots of employees.
Yeah.
And some companies are pivoting, strategy is changing, there's change management stuff. And so maybe even reaching out to some of the people you've worked with in the past in an empathetic way of like, hey, I know this might be a tough time. If there's anything I can do to help, even in a small way, small projects, take smaller bites of things. You might be surprised.
I'm really surprised at I think just the honesty that I'm getting when I talk to people these days. I'm hearing people say, oh, well, my cousin died or my son, things that I typically wouldn't hear from people when I reach out. That trust now is getting built really fast and people are being very honest. So it's that empathy goes a long way.
McLean, one other point that I don't know where I'll get this in, so I think I'll grab it now. Looking at what's going on with businesses with either private equity, VCs, acquisitions. So follow what's going on. Like some businesses have folded into another one or are reorganizing. Anytime that happens, there's work. And
opportunity,
maybe it's the board. Maybe it's the private equity team that comes into a company that, they went in there for a reason and they're investing. Maybe that means there's strategy work. So I suggest people keep their eye on what's going on with your clients and your industries and look for ideas where there might be opportunity and come at it from where could you offer your services in a helping way based on what's going on with that business.
I think that's great. That's where I use Feedly. That's where your Google alerts really come in. We certainly monitor the industry news around our industry, and sometimes you find things you just wouldn't expect. Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the fact that this is a crowded market. People are busy, people are overwhelmed, and I think people are just overwhelmed with life right now. So walking that fine line of having empathy, great. But how do I follow up without stalking in this crowded space?
I think part of that goes back to being able to talk about the value that you can create. You know, if you're just knocking on the door with a resume and you're kind of bothering people to follow up and you're not really talking about what is affecting their business or how you can, you know, help them take their business to that next level and creating that urgency based on the value. I think you're not going to get anywhere if you're just knocking on doors saying, I saw you had a project posted and I haven't heard anything. If you haven't heard anything, there's something going on within that business that, you know, maybe they're not allowed to hire for it. Maybe they use somebody internally. There's all numbers of reasons that things happen with recs. But I think the value creation of what you can bring to that business or that hiring manager that can help separate you from the crowd, because I don't see a lot of people doing that. I think people are still knocking on the door with resumes.
That's focusing on the value creation is a really, really important point. And I think we're seeing a lot of people here talking about getting into sort of like some of the first projects and the strategy work. Some of these larger endeavors tend to happen when you have a lot of independent consulting experience. So are there any tips you would give to somebody who's newer in independent consulting who maybe doesn't have a lot of projects under their belt, so that's why they're leading with their resume?
Yeah, but everybody has projects they did for a full-time, in their full-time work. So I don't think you have to have been an IC for that. I think talk about a project that you did while you worked with, you know, whoever your employer has been. But rather than saying I worked for X, here's what I did. And here's how it changed the business.
And here's how I can do it for you. That's great. It really, projectizing the work that you've done that's a skill that people need to learn. I think we talked about that a little bit in the last session. And I know you'll focus on how to describe that in our session 3 as well,
yes,
with sort of what recruiters are looking for.
Yeah, that's not easy. I see the market changing a bit, and I think we're all going to have to start talking in terms of projects versus chronology of resumes as we get more, you know, more and more people are in this independent world. What clients care about is, what can you help me with? And do you then you follow up with resume stuff on, they want to know, do you have the credentials, you know, to help me with that? But first, identifying what it is that you can do to help their business, I think is really valuable to separate you from the crowd.
I think that's a really important point. And we see that in our state of independence study, is that we're seeing, we call it the cyclical nature of independence, because we see people coming in and out of independent work. Maybe they have a relative at home, or they have a young child they need to care for, somebody, or they just say experience at a full-time job that they can't pass up. And even though they have clients, business is going well, they hop back in. I want to pop into some of these questions here because we're getting just a lot of them in the chat. Stephen says he recently got certified, and this talks about that sort of pigeonholing part, certified in data management, and he works in retail. And he said, what's the best way to let people in other industries know about the certification and not get ignored because I really have experience in retail? I want them to focus on my new certification and not my past experience.
Yeah, well, I think you can talk about what you can do with that certification and don't lead with, I mean, if you can push the industry to the background, meaning there's lots of roles, marketing, recruiting is one, that can go across industries. So, you know, if your new certification is something that could be utilized in, you know, healthcare, and it's about the certification, then talk about the things that you learned how to do in that. Pro bono is another idea. You want to work in a certain industry that you don't have experience in, you know, maybe it's a doctor's office or something small, but like find a way to get a little bit of experience under your belt in that industry that you want to go into if you're not hearing from people, you know, based on just that certification.
I think that's great. Use it as a hook. And I, before I came to join MBO here, gosh, it's been a long time now, but I was mostly in hospitality, and I had been in healthcare. I'd done a couple of stints, and I found that I was really successful when I said, listen, I've worked in 5 different verticals, and all that demonstrates is that I can learn yours just as fast as I learned the other ones.
It's about
I ask a lot of questions. Yeah.
True. And you know what? If you look at today's markets, even with all this COVID stuff that has brought up new roles and things we've never heard of, you know, the point is people have to be able to learn. because
Yeah. Your market's not
doing,
staying the
yeah,
same.
exactly. Whatever we're all doing today is going to be different 5 years from now. So helping
Let's
clients
hope.
understand that that's what's important behaviorally is being a quick study or being able to, pick up new things and new industries. I think more and more businesses understand that's what's important.
I think that's great. And so we have a question here that says, is it necessary to go to end clients or could you work sort of with a product vendor that's specialized in getting in? And I think the answer is yes. You could partner with the vendor works with a client and use that
Sure.
as your sort of
That's
in.
actually a great idea. There are a lot of companies out there that want to sell their software but don't want to do implementation or any type of business analysis around certain things. And hey, it doesn't hurt. Maybe understanding who are the salespeople in that organization that are closing all the deals. It's their clients are the ones that are in need of some of those kinds of services. So yeah, and actually a lot of them have some partnering programs where you can get certified. It's only helpful for them for more people to know their platform and go out there and try to implement it. And they will refer you in some cases.
And that's something we're seeing in one of our enterprise subject matter expert communities. We were talking with one of the heads of that the other day, and he said that training has also been a really big thing. So you just bought this software. Now I bring consultants in to go in and show you how to actually use it. So implementation, sort of expert services is big as well. All right, so we have a question. Somebody who's worked through Millennium Challenge Corporation. So one of our consultants says, how can you or MBO partners help us find new consulting opportunities? So without making it a commercial, you want to talk about some of the ways that our consultants can see what we have available?
Yeah, we have our marketplace, which really is for our enterprise clients or even other small businesses. Some of our Advantage members, some of our other communities are on there. So what MBO tries to do is create the environment for people who are independent consultants to go and, connect with clients. We're not, I'll be the first one to tell you, we're not a placement agency. We're not going to, represent anybody. We try to create that enablement and invite, like with things like this webinar, helping you understand what should I look like on LinkedIn? What type of services could I sell? And then giving you, we've got that backbone of that contract vehicle. We make sure you're compliant and any of these large companies feel comfortable using you, covered by insurance, all of those sort of things. So you can look in the marketplace and you can look across clients that MBO might have contracts with already. But our service is really one where we're kind of more into the enablement of helping you market yourself.
Yeah. Once you have that project, we make it really easy for you to get in with the enterprise, to be compliant and certified. I'll touch on the Advantage component and a couple of ways that people who are interested in getting together can find more work. MBO Advantage, for those of you who don't know, is our service for our I'm going to call it our most experienced talent, really geared towards those people who have good experience in their business. They know what they're doing. They don't have issues getting projects.
Yeah, they've been at it for a while.
Yeah, they want somebody to run their business. We'll help them set up with their business entity. But we're facilitating amongst that group monthly networking sessions. We had one earlier this week. And the thing that I find most interesting is that these members are really interested in teaming with each other. So coming in and then going into pitch. So an idea that I've seen happen successfully a lot, people are asking how they can get jobs in the chat, is to partner with a couple of other independents and say, I can do this. I have 3 other people who can do this. So you can sell that full scope of the project and not just put the onus on the enterprise to have to go find 4 people that complement your skill set. You bring that in.
And we are seeing a lot more of that, because what that infrastructure is, when you think about it, there's not employees anywhere. These are micro businesses that are partnering together to deliver services to large companies that actually can probably do it much more inexpensively than, compared to larger companies that have all of that infrastructure and overhead. So there's a lot of advantage to doing it.
Well, and the advantage of doing it through MBO is so nice. It's very easy to pay people how they want to be structured, to take a fee cut if you found the work, et cetera. So that's great. There is also, for those of you who are interested outside of the Advantage program, we do have a group called the Independent Consultants Group on LinkedIn as well. It's as active as you guys want to make it. So if you want to try to drive some networking amongst yourselves, that's a great place to start. And I will pop in after this webinar and approve anybody who wants to join. So
yeah, and you know what's nice about that
chat.
too, McLean, I'll just add, is that at least you know when you're dealing within that MBO community on some of these, they're very you're with like-minded.
They're professionals. Yeah. These people have really good skills. They've worked with our enterprise clients. So it's that trust factor. Again, I think that's a thing that you're really trying to build. A couple of additional questions here. How do I get employers to hire my company and work as a contractor instead of hiring me as an employee? So many aren't interested in me being a 1099. They want me as an employee. How would you negotiate that?
Well, if you're dealing with, it sounds like you're in demand then. So dealing with hiring managers that, want to use their services, I think those are the people that you want to go to bat for you to their company and say, what difference does it make? I'm assuming you're saying that the managers want that, because I'm seeing more companies not care about the work or like which venue you come through, but they care about the work. So they'll use you as an employee or they'll use you as a 1099. In fact, some of our enterprise clients have these PMO offices there for that exact reason, meaning tell me what you want to do and what the project and the work is. And then we try to, they'll try to source it with either. So I think my advice there would be if you're going to get anywhere, it's not going to be with HR or procurement. It's going to be with who is your buyer that services.
I think that's very well put. I have a question from Jim, and it says, what countries outside of the US do you work in and with independent consultants? He's from the UK. We can do business in, I think it's more than 80 at this point, countries if our clients have projects, but we don't tend to advertise those projects as often. But most of our enterprise organizations we can support.
Those are part of it's our enterprise organization that is referring us people to the platform, and they need to pay them in different countries. We are talking to some of them now about putting together a marketplace for some of those. So, hopefully what you'll see to come is some projects actually posted within the UK and other areas. We don't have that today, but we do have the ability to pay people within that platform.
That's a good stay tuned in to come. I think it's happening.
We are doing a lot with international expansion.
Yeah, that's excellent. And then one more question here from Jeff says, I've noticed the largest commented posts are around frustration working with recruiters. Many people share the same issues. What can we do to help make recruiters more effective for all parties?
Yeah. So I guess I would say, first of all, people don't really understand how recs get into a system or what the recruiters are really working on. So how the process kind of works, and it's broken, it's not wonderful, but they are given sometimes, they have to fill 8 to 10 jobs a month. And they're putting stuff out there and getting through their applications as best they can. But once they find 3 or 4 people that, they think the hiring manager might like, there could be 80 other applications there. They don't have time to go through the rest of those. So, how can you help them? Number one, I would say, make your resume or your LinkedIn or whatever it is, stand out to that, be that one person that they open that rec and they open your resume and they're like, wow, this person really fits. And I want to go to the hiring manager with this. They really have to look through lots of stuff in short periods of time in order to hit some of the numbers that they need to hit. And so what goes along with that is what people will refer to as a black hole. You're not going to hear about, every job that's out there. And sometimes there are jobs out there that people intend to fill. Then they said, well, let's advertise for, oh, wait a minute, we're going to fill it internally. Like, there are stops and starts that happen with recruiters all the time that they're frustrated with too. They have candidates hanging there. Somebody told them to go look for something and they did it. And And now it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not sure if we can hire that. That happens. Like, and I know that's frustrating. We hear from our consultants a lot that, they'd like to get some insight or know what happened. And the reality is, like, when you're an employee, they are going to give you feedback as to, how you're doing. When you're a micro business, companies just aren't going to resource for, kind of telling us, why you got that project or you didn't.
Yeah, and that's something we find in our client of choice data as well, that independents really want that feedback. They want to feel part of the team. Unfortunately, they're just not getting it. But I will say that at least on the enterprise side, we're working to educate our clients that this would be helpful and help them move towards that sort of desired client of choice status. I said we were getting to the end, and then a flood of questions came in. People thought they were missing their chance here. So really good question from Rodney. He just says, what's the best strategy for finding remote gigs given the pandemic and needing to stay at home? The data that I'm showing is saying that companies are actually more remote friendly than ever.
Yeah.
But are you seeing the same?
That is a great question. And here's what I would suggest for everybody. Companies still haven't caught up to reality, where still seeing them say, well, I know we're working the pandemic right now, but we still really want somebody in, Los Angeles for when we all go back to work. And yet you'll ask them, well, when do you think you guys are going back to work? Oh, probably not for 6 months. Well, how long's the project? 3 months. So guess what? Those I would offer your services in and still apply to, saying, hey, if this is a 3-month project and we're still in this world, I think that this pandemic in some ways has helped more organizations to see that you can get work done remotely. And I think that's going to explode for RICs if that's the case. Because when clients ask us, do you have XYZ skills? And we look at it, whether it's in our marketplace or the rest of our platform, location is probably the #1 deterrent of like, yeah, I have that, but it's not where you want it. So the more we can get clients to see that we can do distributed work really well, and I think we're on the cusp of, just so you know, I'm always pushing them going, well, I think you could probably get away with doing this project with remote talent. And wow, look at the talent that you have if you're looking nationwide, not just in your backyard.
I think that's really critical. It drives me crazy when people say you have to be within driving distance, but you're not going to come in. And I've also found that sometimes just saying I'm happy to travel when needed will solve that issue. Couple of other points coming in here. Peter makes a really nice point about those who are transitioning from full-time to consulting work. We have a bill rate calculator on our website that will help you translate what you want to make, of what you are going to be spending on different expenses, and then how much you should charge per hour. And so we can link that one up for you guys.
Yeah, that is actually, Peter, that's a really great point, because sometimes people learn the hard way on their first project that they didn't price it right because they didn't understand all the pieces. So yeah, that's a really important thing to really understand what your true rate is that you're going to walk away with.
Accounting for taxes and all the other fees are good. Somebody says they could use help writing compelling case studies and blogs. Do we know copywriters and editors who understand the consulting space? So, and then I see another question on what's the experience with LinkedIn ProFinder. So first is yes, ProFinder's there, but my thought is that's a great way to use the independent consultants group on LinkedIn. Post it, you'll get other people who've worked within the platform. I'm going to link here in the chat some of the members in Advantage. I know we have at least 1 or 2 communications people. So
yeah, and I will say, go ahead and do that, because across our platform, when I look across our marketplace, at least, we have many copywriters across industries. That is a role that has been able to be remote. So as a result, there's lots of, and so we've created a pretty good community there of those types of people. So I agree with McLean, like if you reach out for that, I think those are services that you all could help each other with.
Yeah, we've had some good success in finding them, even for our own work, just within our network. A question for client outreach: do you suggest sending a resume and a pitch deck? What would you do to go ahead and build that one-sheeter or the sort of marketing materials that go along with your resume?
So I would say that one, we talked about this last time a little bit. It's being concise about what it is you do. Here are the types of things to call me for. What I find with a lot of resumes or things that I look at, I'm spending time trying to figure out, how would I use this person? Like, what would be the best project for them? And you need to be able to tell them what that is if you want to catch their attention. So, I guess my best advice there is start with the end in mind. What type of work can you help them with? And then you get to your credentials, because that's what they think about first. What's the project? And then next will be, is this person have the best credentials to deliver this work? And that's where the resume comes in.
I think that's really great. So let's see here. I have not sometimes heard responses when I've submitted on the marketplace. And is this being looked at to foster a more partnership-friendly environment? And this is from Alan. We were just talking about this before the session started.
And I'm happy to respond to that. Like same thing with full-time jobs. Just so you know, jobs in general, it's, lots of people apply to many things and they don't hear anything. And so number one, I would say, don't take it personally. we are building best practices for our clients that we're encouraging them. And remember, this is their marketplace. We are trying to create this platform where come in and put your projects so consultants and ICs can, you guys can marry up and meet together there. So we aren't running their marketplace. We are providing the environment and we are giving them best practices around, yes, we do give reports and stats on, gee, how many people have replied to a certain rec and might not have gotten dispositioned or heard anything. If we're going to we have some recs out there now that I've worked with one of our clients on that we have called out as being talent pooling, meaning, hey, we're creating a community that we want to hear from you for future work, don't have work right now, but when you're applying to that, you should be understanding that you're probably not going to hear anything today, but what they're trying to do is pipeline and get people, kind of into their bench for when that project comes. Now they have 90 people sitting there that they know are interested and have the skill set and they can go there quick. So I guess my answer to that is realize, to some extent, could we get the entire world to answer every person who applies to an opportunity, full-time or contract? Probably not. So, we try with client of choice, as McLean said, we don't want recs out there that aren't real. We're encouraging them to, really put stuff out there that they're interested in or close it or put it on hold. We're not going to ever be 100% there.
Yeah, I think we've made good strides though. I would say that the recs in the system are there. The question is it the top priority? And you pointed out something in the last session that I will note. I'm increasingly seeing across all platforms recs that are labeled as talent pooling your future opportunities. And that's a really real thing clients are saying. I'm not looking for it today, but when I'm ready, I want people to apply quickly. So just note that it'll probably be in the description. So there's a chance that you may not be hearing back because it's actually a pool rec.
Which again, I would say there's nothing wrong with. What they're trying to do is shortcut how quickly, when that big project comes in, how quickly they can respond to it.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Couple of just general points here in the questions. Victor says that he had a firm at one point. He had 8 professional engineers, and he found them difficult to keep because of varying interests. And so he says, how can I successfully assemble partnerships, but sort of on an ad hoc basis? And I would say that that's something that we see the members in Advantage doing really nicely is they band together, they do their project. We have a really nice vehicle for them to serve that project up. And then they all go off and sell their own business and they may never come back together, but then the onus isn't on you to keep them. Is there any other way that you're seeing this happen on our platform or any tips?
I think that we are the perfect environment for that because what you are working with then is all people who understand that they're independent contractors. It sounds like you had some people who, which they're still out there, people are just more comfortable working full-time, want that security, and that's okay. But the onus was on you then to keep them busy all the time. And so what's different when you put together a team with the independent contracting world is everybody understands we're working together for this project. And when this project's over, you know, maybe they're on this webinar because they know they have to go, you know, find their next one. And maybe that would be through you, but it's not this expectation that it has to be. So I think we're really ripe for that.
That's great. So because we're sort of coming up on time, I have just two quick fired questions that I have. So Christian says, when you say have the credentials to deliver, are you referring to like a 70-30 split of education or experience or something else? So what in your mind determines credentials? I think that's sort of, you know, in your head, do you have the credentials and do you feel confident you can do a good job on the project? Less, have you done it before?
Yeah. Well, what we do on a resume when we're looking at, you know, we know what the project is, we know what the manager's looking for, we know the expertise that we're thinking these people should have. When we look at the resume, we want to see, you know, if the role is for an Oracle implementation, when you look at the resume, you want to see, oh, this person has done X amount of Oracle implementations. Maybe not exactly in the same environment, but they have something foundation to draw on that makes it reasonable that you would believe they could deliver this project work. So that's what I'm talking about when I mean credentials. Certification sometimes, I mean, I guess it depends on the project, you know, in technology, sometimes there's that, but it's whatever it is on paper that can prove that there's a good chance of success that this person's going to be able to deliver.
I think that's really important. And again, if you don't have the experience, you've talked about some ways to go get it. You've talked about the pro bono work, the sort of speculative pitching. And then last one from Jane, and she says, when I search on Indeed, contract jobs are just less common than full-time jobs. Should I apply for full-time jobs when I want contract jobs?
Sure.
So I guess let's cover searching on Indeed. And then, not that it's bad, but just, you know, sort of the limitations of that.
Yeah, the reason you don't see that many contract jobs on Indeed is because organizations are not set up today. That's what we're trying to do with direct sourcing, to really source those. So usually Indeed is going to be full-time because that's what the, you know, internal HR groups, that's where they are. Contract jobs are either going to staffing companies, you know, depending on the level, or consulting companies. And that's where our marketplace is trying to sit in the middle of it and have, you know, the client put recs out there that they can, you know, direct source on for contract roles. So that's why you don't see those on Indeed very often. There's nothing wrong with, I think we actually have an Advantage member, if I'm right, McLean, that applied to or found a contract by going to a full-time, you know, seeing a full-time need for one of our clients and reaching out somehow on LinkedIn. He figured out who the hiring manager was and he's on billing there right now. He knew he had the contract with this company so he could easily ride that. And the role initially was positioned as full-time. Now he didn't go to the recruiter. He ended up going to the manager and maybe he was just good at doing that. But yeah, sometimes full-time roles could turn into contract.
And I will point out too that this is an example of how MBOs streamline the process. I heard from another Advantage member earlier this week, and she said, I went to the client and I said, this is what I want to do. And they said, we want to bring you on full time. It's really hard to work as an approved vendor for this company. And she said, actually, I work through MBO Partners, and MBO Partners is an approved vendor. So she used our MSA to get in there. And at that point, the hiring manager for the company didn't actually even know, because it's such a big organization, they weren't aware that we were an approved vendor. But the minute she said it, it streamlined the process. And we just had one last question, which I can address quickly. It said, do you publish a list of your contractors, or do you only send them to clients? So we actually don't proactively send our list of contractors to clients either. We, like I said, you're welcome to join our LinkedIn group. There's no large network right now where all the contractors can see each other. We definitely are that's on something we're considering doing. But if you have interest in knowing if we have a contract with a client, with an enterprise client, ask your client care manager, and they can certainly provide you that information. And if you don't, we're always happy to work to get MBO on as an approved vendor there as well, if you're bringing work in and want our help. So please reach out. So we're going to launch one quick poll here at the end, just asking if anybody wants to hear about any of these programs. Check the box. We'll reach out to you proactively. But Amy, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything I missed asking today?
I don't think so. I think my only other pitch on the pro bono was also to mentor people, and I think if you
that's really nice.
Offer
you can
to
do
help
it,
other
give
people,
back.
Things happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I find I'm always happy to reach out and help somebody too if they're in my alumni network or something like that. So just a quick reminder, we do have August 20th. We have our third session for this, and Amy has promised she's actually going to go in and show you what a recruiter sees. So you're going to see some live tech on that one, which is really, really fun. Of course, you can ask any questions you want, and we will send a recording of this to everybody else. So thank you, Amy, for being with us. Thank you, everybody, for joining today, and we will hear from you again soon. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye. Have a great day.